Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. Once again, temporary name. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dispatches from Elsewhere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this episode, it's Fredwynn centric, and I like, obviously us getting an opportunity to finally get to know Fredwynn. Obviously, Octavio kind of explaining at the beginning, give you an idea of kind of who Fredwynn is. That basically he's the type of guy that kind of needs, to be okay, he needs to find the answers. He needs to cross the finish line. So he's very eccentric about, he has to kind of solve problems. There has to be something he has to solve, or he isn't okay. And so the fact of the matter is, we see Octavio pulls him out the trunk. He's like, "Oh, come on, friend." And he's like, "Oh, I see this for what it is." But the people that are with him is like, he's hardcore. It's like, and hardcore is like, they think he's a hardcore gamer, that he's one of those people so invested in the game they go super hardcore and stuff like that. Because Fredwynn's like, "I know that you're not them. I know you actually work for them. You know who they are." Because obviously for him, he's the only one that really looks at this as a giant conspiracy. Peter looks at things as, this is potentially something real. There is real magic. Simone and Janice look at this as kind of fun, almost kind of an escape from their lives, but at the same time, for Simone, it's kind of an escape from her life. For Janice, it's an escape, but also just meant to be some fun adventure she can share with her husband Lev. But Fredwynn's the one that looks at it as some gigantic conspiracy, and it's like, where's the rest of your team? And he's like, well, they'll catch up, and even if they don't, well, then it'll just be me. So it's a thing of Fredwynn kind of has a hard time working with people. It's like, if they catch up, fine, it's whatever, but the fact of the matter is, they don't, then I'll be the one that kind of figure it out on my own. So Octavio puts him in the closet, and he's like, this isn't just an ordinary closet. He's like, there has to be more to it. And it's like, you were supposed to choose, either go the side of the Elsewhere Society or the Jejun Institute, but he didn't choose either. So it's like, and you're kind of all alone. So hey, you're stuck here. But also showing you that Fredwynn is very smart. The fact is, he was able to kind of MacGyver some stuff together to get himself out of the room. And so he's trying to figure out because I think what did he say? That's Fred, that's what you do. Fred, that's what you do. You win. So it's kind of interesting him being his own hype man. But the fact of the matter is, he goes to meet with I forgot the lady's position, but she's the one with all the prompts and stuff like that. And he's pretending he's like, I'm the intern and stuff like that. It's like, I'm just making sure, I'm here to, turn the page or something if you need me to. But he's, trying to get, it's like, how were you able to do this? The whole, because obviously we're seeing his perspective of seeing the Janice situation. It's like, these memories and stuff like that. It's like gathering enough, information they can gather on their particular people they brought on stage, plus any, capabilities that VR presents, kind of combining that together lets them do the experience that, Janice saw last episode, that we kind of see this episode, but Fredwynn's kind of on the other side. You're on the more he's behind the scenes, he sees the more production side of it. But I love he turns, and the intern's there. He's like, the guy's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm the intern." It's like, "You're 40. I'm the actual intern." And he's like, "You were fired." He's like, "Can you?" He's like, "How was I fired from the intern? Who are you?" And he was like, I forgot what his name was. It was Fred something, the intern. And it's like, no. And I love that sadly in the end the lady was like, "You made me lose my place. The fact of the matter is, intern, you are fired." So it's like in the end he ended up getting fired anyway. But obviously we go to the end of last episode, or at least near the end of last episode, where Fredwynn is like, this is what's really going on. This isn't just a game, it's manipulation. But the next day, I wonder what kind of, I guess it was some kind of, I'm assuming it was some kind of powder to kind of get the electrolytes kind of, or the synapses in his head firing. That's what I'm assuming. And, it's like, that's a lot of steering up and stuff like that. So Janice shows up and everything. He's finishing drinking. It's like, and I love that he's prepared, exactly what he's going to say. And Simone's like, wait, did you write down what you're going to say? He was like, yes, I figured this was, sometimes I think he said, I get a little enthusiastic, so I need to kind of write down. And he kind of pauses for a moment, and there's just silence between everyone. And Peter's like, does it say to wait for their response? And Fredwynn looks down and he's like, yes, it does. And it's like, okay. So okay. So I love that whole thing. And no, go ahead. Obviously Simone's kind of being it's just kind of a game and stuff like that. But Fredwynn, he takes it so seriously, he slams his hands down. But it's so interesting because showing you that the partnerships that are created, obviously Simone gets Peter, whereas Janice understands Fredwynn. It's kind of interesting how that works. Like, and he's like, I'm sorry. And basically explains some interesting stuff about him. We first find out the fact is he's actually a millionaire. Like, well, for what, he's actually going to a very good school. He graduated, and the fact is that, he's like, oh, I got my first million when I was 20 something. Like, he had to watch, he works in data and stuff like that. And so I love that whole explanation of, like, basically it's something that you guys can never understand, especially you, Peter. And he's like, no offense. And Peter's just like, but the fact of the matter is, it was an interesting thing. He even brings up a honeypot. I think because even Simone was like, what's a honeypot? But Janice was kind of like, I'm curious, like, I interpret like a honey, like, I feel like I know what the honeypot is, but I'm not sure. Honeypot is someone that kind of draws you in to kind of take your money. Like, it's kind of like, not necessarily, I mean, is it the same thing as a gold digger? Like, I'm curious, is that what the same thing is, or is it something else entirely? Because I think it is, like, supposed to be like a person that's supposed to entice you and then they basically rob you blind. I'm guessing that's what that is, because like Fredwynn had talked about the fact that he sold his cars and stuff like that because he realized, and it kind of seems like this is kind of implying some stuff that basically he sold the cars because he realized he didn't really like cars. I think it's a thing of like he sold stuff because it didn't make him feel okay, it didn't make him feel better like he thought it would, so that's what I'm kind of thinking. But it's like, I want you to join me. We should be detectives. And I love Peter being like, detectives like Law and Order SVU. And then love Simone like, oh, my Nana loves that show. And I love Janice be like, it's a great, like, I think she said like, oh my God, like, I love that. Like, everyone loves that show. There was even a thing of like, because I love that line where Fredwynn was like, you guys haven't been asking the question, what's the point behind this game? And Simone's like, I distinctly asked that question. Peter's like, I've asked that question too. And Janice being like, it's a pretty popular question, Fredwynn. I just love that. But they're all joining forces. But Fredwynn is so determined. He's like trying to go outside the game with the whole situation. And they show up at someone's address because it's like, oh, Janice wasn't chosen by random, that they had people in a list and stuff like that of like who, it's like, oh, but where are we going to just knock on someone's door? They're trying to back Fredwynn not to do it, and he knocks on the door, and as a little girl answers, and Peter sneezes, and they're like, Gesundheit. Peter's like, sorry, I sneeze when I get nervous. But he knocks again because they're telling him not to, and the mom answers the door. She's like, I'm gonna call the police if you'll get away, because like what Fredwynn's like, oh, you need to tell us what you really know. And she's like, are you threatening me? And they're like, no, sorry, he's just a little, and they're pulling him away. But as they're pulling away, she smiles and kind of shushes him with her finger, like, oh, you're right, but you need to be quiet, Fredwynn. And obviously he's expressing this to everyone, but he just sounds crazy. And he's trying to make it seem like, no, you're 100% right. It's all a game. I'm sorry. I just kind of got caught up in it. But then he talks to Janice. He's like, why can't they understand like what's really going on here? And I think it speaks volumes that the one person he decides to talk to is Janice. Because we never got the insight into what him and Janice were up to while Peter and Simone were kicking it. Because we never really got that insight. During episode 2, like when they were kind of off doing their thing as well, because they went to the Jejune thing, whereas Peter and Simone had followed, the elsewhere society route. It's even, well, because I forgot to talk about it, but the lady that was running the prompts and stuff like that was like, yeah, like the elsewhere society showing up they were kind of like weren't supposed to, because she was so distracted with everything, especially Fredwynn and an intern, that she kind of missed the cues and stuff like that, or kind of set things up ahead of time, whatever the case may be. But you have Janice telling Fredwynn that, this, is kind of telling him to kind of take it, because the whole point was, because even Peter had suggested, how about we kind of take, pump the brakes a little bit, like slow down a little bit. But for Fredwynn, he's just so sure, like, oh, the answer's around the corner. But Janice kind of walks away, and she goes home and tells Fredwynn to go home and get some sleep. And he tries to, and it's interesting, like him laying in bed being like, the fact of the matter is apparently he hasn't slept for the past 2 days because so much has been running through his mind. The fact of the matter is, he's like, and it's interesting too, because I think it was kind of a nice element just to show that he is religious, because he's praying and he's like, God or whatever energy, whatever entity is there, like, answer my, he's praying to, who's saying like, also help me understand my teammates more. It's F to the red to the win. It's your boy, it's your boy F to the red to the win. I love that he said that. But I also was looking into clues. He was hoping to get clues about figuring this whole situation out, because obviously showing that is so important to him. but he couldn't sleep. So he goes to Janice's place, and he's like, "Oh, Janice, I forgot. Because he figured he was missing something, and so he does the whole mind palace thing, which is like, where do I know the mind palace thing from? I guess it kind of reminds me a little bit of Black Lightning, the whole thing that Jennifer had set up inside of her head, like kind of like that. But I feel like I know Mind Palace from something else. I feel like there's an anime where I remember Mind Palace from, but I could be mistaken. There's something I've seen where someone has referenced having a Mind Palace. I think it's probably like a universal enough thing that probably multiple properties have ever taken. It's basically like this palace that you build in your mind to kind of a construct in your mind to kind of keep everything kind of organized. And it's kind of interesting because he basically uses this as an opportunity to kind of remember everything. And I like they kind of distinguish it by showing you like it in a different light. It's kind of like reddish and stuff like that. It's a different, like the screens and stuff like that. It's a completely different tone, or at least I might be confusing that with Genesis. We'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is that, he looks through, he's like, okay, what did I miss? And he sees on the presents, there's something on the card. And I like that thing of like, he can't see it because he didn't focus on it enough. So he was so focused on the prompts, he didn't see that the key was right in front of him of like the next clue to all of this stuff. So he goes to Janice because he knows the one person that had saw it was Janice herself when she was in VR. So he goes over to her place and she's kind of like, oh, come on, like it's so late and stuff. But he apologizes, but she's like, all right, come inside. And then he gets to see for the first hand the whole Lev situation. And it's like, why are you keeping this a secret? She's like, I'm not keeping it a secret. She just never really kind of I think it's just something she wasn't really comfortable, because I think it's a thing of like, once other people know, it becomes a little more real, because it turns out like he had a stroke, And it was interesting because her and Fredwynn had like, as he says it later on, kind of an emotional moment, like they kind of opened up, because he talked about the fact is that his mom would kind of feed them whatever, and that's why his brother is overweight and he is the way he is because he's disciplined, and so that led to everything. We even learned that, because I was curious if Janice had kids or not, because I think I remember them having kids, but I could they definitely had kids. I think but they never focused on it too much, so that's why I kind of like forgot about it. But it's like, because she brings up like they have a son named Ben, he's a lawyer, he has a family and everything, lawyer like his dad is, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But for Janice, it is a thing of like, she gets, introducing Fredwynn to Lev and Lev to Fredwynn. But I think that was just kind of a, nice kind of emotional moment, especially for, her, because you can tell like this whole situation, because I love it. Like the reason why she has to be home at such a particular time, because for her, it's like, oh, like she's like, I felt him squeeze my hands. I've seen him open his eyes, because it's a thing of like, will he recover or not? And I don't think that's something she really knows. But the fact is, she's like, she doesn't want to miss any small moments with him, because like she doesn't know, like maybe these small moments might turn to a big moment of like, he might wake up and he might be 100% okay. So that's why it's like, oh, like Margaret looks after him during the day, but I want to be there to look, but she doesn't want to miss anything that might happen with him at night. So that's why she's like, I have to be the one that kind of stay here and take care of it. I want to look after him, and like I said, that led to that whole conversation about, taking care of people and looking after him. But luckily Fredwynn was able to convince Janice to like, I know I'm a little crazy, but I need your help kind of figuring out this whole key to this situation. So he gets her to go into her mind, like looking at some photos from the wedding. Okay, now go into your mind palace. She's like, I don't have one. He's like, yes, you do. Everyone has a mind palace. I don't. Yes, you do. Now try. And he's like, calm. And he's saying all this stuff, and she's smiling. He's like, stop laughing. And she's like, I'm sorry. I was like, oh, it's just not going to work, is it? Because even she's like, it's not. He's like, yes, it's going to work. But then it does, and she's in an empty space, and she's like, it's empty. He's like, this is your mind palace, but it's just not organized. So you just have to think about stuff. And I like him manifesting inside of her mind palace. And, it is working, because it's like, oh, she's like, I can see the wedding and everything, but she can't see the card because it's blurry. She's like, oh, I can't do it. But lo and behold, who shows up? Her younger self. And she's like, I thought you wanted nothing to do with me. It's like, I don't. But the fact of the matter is, I'm here to help, It's like, she said, and then Fredwynn was like, she, and she's like, I see. And it's like, because I think for her, she didn't want to admit that like her mind palace manifested like a version of herself that she saw because of the VR. So I think that's such an interesting element that kind of crossed back over. I mean, I think that's like her subconscious kind of talking to her. It just manifests itself specifically as her younger self. Just kind of because her younger self, like who she wanted to be, is obviously all these plans she had for her life when she was younger before she got married are in conflict with everything that she's done as, in her married life. So that whole thing from last episode. But luckily, she was able to see it, and they kind of, Fredwynn was able to piece it together and figure out it was an address and everything. And it's like, you did it, Janice. She's like, wait, I did? It's like, yeah, you did it. I was like, oh, that was nice teamwork. So first person to go to is Simone, and you're like, she's like, what are you doing here? And I love that whole thing with, it's like, yeah, I remembered something, I got the next piece of puzzle, so I went over and woke up Fredwynn. It's like, yeah, Fredwynn's like, yeah, I was in deep sleep, and then because of this puzzle piece that Janice got, she came rushing me over to wake me up, and it's like, now she's here to wake you up. And I love, because Fredwynn knew that, like, if it came from him, Simone would be less likely to listen, just because it'd be a thing of like, oh, like, he's going off the deep end again. But at least if it's coming from Janice, it'd be a little more willing to listen. And I love Simone being like, are you being held hostage? You can tell me if you're being held hostage or something. And it's like, oh, like, you know, in case something happens, like Fredwynn was like, you know, because she's like, are you going to get aggressive? He's like, I'm only going to get aggressive if they I'm only going to get confrontational if they confront us. What was it? I forgot what he described himself as. He's like, I'm deadly like a lady cheetah or something like that. And you have at one point, Janice kind of turns back and looks at him for it, but nevertheless, next stop, you know, they were able to convince, it's like, Janice is like, please trust me. Like, you know, the fact is, I'm not asking you to come with us. I'm inviting you. So, because it's like, Fredwynn, you know, can be a little crazy. I'm just like, I'm sorry, Fredwynn. Fredwynn just kind of like, kind of accepts it. It's like, but for you and me, this is probably the most fun we've had in a while. So come on, you know. So they go over to Peter's next, and I love the whole thing about like Peter. It'd probably help if you opened up a little bit more so I can actually see your mouth. He's like, oh, sorry, and he just opens it enough and moves his head enough for her to actually see his mouth. Okay. I even love later on asking, why didn't you just let us into your house? He's like, yeah, it's not. My place isn't made for guests. It's like, well, then who is it made for? Residents. Kind of saying like it's enough for one person to live into. But also it's like, it might be to think of like, I'm embarrassed for you guys to see where I live and stuff like that, and the inside and stuff like that. But regardless, it was actually interesting because it took Simone, because Simone would be the one to be able to convince Peter. Like I said, it's like Fredwynn was able to convince Janice, and Janice was able to convince Simone. Simone was able to convince Peter. So it's just the synergy that is this team is really interesting. And it's like, oh, you know, they head over to the address. It's like, oh, watch your step. Oh, watch your step. Simone's telling Fredwynn, watch your step. He's like, don't tell me what to do. And he steps on something because it looks like, oh, maybe it's like a pit or something. But it turns out it's a painting that actually hide like a doorway or something. And I love Fredwynn being like, you were just going to let me fall. And she's like, yes, I was. And Janice is like, shush. It's like she tried to warn you, but she didn't want to listen. I love that out of any two in the group, they butt heads the most, Simone and Fredwynn. That's so interesting. But it's like, this is the next steps to finding Clara, and that's where the episode ends. Dude, I'm really like excited, you know, to see the flow of this show, just like getting to know these characters, but also see this adventure they're on. Because that is the big thing of like, is Fredwynn crazy? Is there actually some conspiracy? Because I didn't even talk about it, because basically he thinks that this is all some. I meant to talk about it, but I'll go ahead and bring it up here to tell him that this is some conspiracy about like how like, you know, companies and stuff gather your data, your information, you give it to them so heavily, and it basically, but he feels like now more and more companies are accumulating each other, like, but basically folding into one another instead of just using the data for money like they had been using before. Because Fredwynn even talks about like he was a part of that system, because it's like, yeah, because you guys are idiots and stuff like that, which even Simone took offense to that. But the fact of the matter is now he feels like they're using it for power, and he thinks that's what this is. So whether that ends up being the case, whether it's real like Peter thinks, or Simone and Janice who think it's just a fun game with maybe there's a prize at the end of it. I'm curious to kind of continue this road. Like I said, I know what this is, like the documentary that this is actually based on, called The Institute. Like I said, I talked about it like in maybe the first episode. I read into it a little bit, but I'm curious to see like what happens with this adaptation, like where this all leads. Because I could be mistaken, and I was looking at the episode list last week. I think the next episode is called Clara. I think, well, especially with this ending, kind of makes sense and everything. But I'm interested to kind of dive into that to find out, oh, what is this whole Clara situation? Like how far down a rabbit hole is it a game? Like it seems like it is a game, but maybe there is a deeper game within the game type of situation, kind of a little Westworld, kind of like getting to the center of the maze type of situation. What will you find type of thing? we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good